Okay, welcome everyone. This is our Wednesday Wisdom where we go over tips, tricks, and information on band instrument repair. Today is part four of our 5-part series on pivot screws, and today we're going to be going over the King adjustable locking pivot screw system and show you how to recognize that and fit it and all that good stuff. We do have a hashtag for today. Today's hashtag is going to be All Hail the King. That's because we're doing King locking pivot screws today, so make sure you take that hashtag right there and put it in the comments below so that you can be entered in for this week's prize. We do a prize each week, and this week's winner is Jody Anna. Jody, send me an email to rich@MusicMedic.com, and I will be sure to get you your prize. Thank you guys so much for participating. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and
click the bell.
Click the bell.
You better click that bell. We'll know too. We'll know. We get reports every week on who clicks the bell and who doesn't.
That's right. So click the bell so we can share all of this information with you and when we start and stop. So Ryan, we have the King adjustable pivot screws, but why don't we go over and recap the first three styles.
First three. The first one being the true tapered system. Here's your post. There's your tapered pivot screw. There's more post stuff. At the end of the hinge tube, we have a corresponding tapered hole that matches, or at least it should match, the taper of your pivot screw. And we talked about that. So this is actually how it rides right on that pivot screw right there.
And that's featured on Selmer
Mark 6s,
Nagasawas.
Yep, Yamaha's, Colworth, more the professional brand, because it does take a little bit of time to perfect that and how it feels.
Gotcha.
The false tapered system, and that's why I call this one the true tapered system, because there's also something that I like to call the false tapered system, where the post is pretty much the same. The pivot screw has a slight difference in that it's a little bit more of a cylindrical section right in here before it tapers to that point. Okay, so there's our little bit more of a cylindrical section. The end of the hinge tube is another big difference in that rather than having this tapered hole, we have a cylindrical hole just drilled in, and then a lot of times what you'll find is just stuff put in here, pieces of plastic, cork, shavings, brass shavings, just anything to kind of take up that slot, because there's nothing, it doesn't ride on this. Really, it rides right here. Okay, so the end of this hinge tube has to be butted up right against that post face, and you can do a little bit of swedging here to kind of fit those, but that's the false tapered system.
Okay.
Then we have the con with the locking pivot screws. We'll draw that down here. So there's our con. Here's our pivot screw. It is a tapered pivot screw, and in the end of the key there is also a tapered hole, so it's very similar to the true tapered system. But the main difference is we can adjust how far that tip sticks out by a little tiny set screw that's right in here. Okay.
So Ryan, somebody asked me if we were still using the hex pivot screws, replacement pivot screws.
For the set screws?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, a lot of times these on cons, they'll get messed up. They'll get lost. They'll fall out. Whatever happens, if that does happen, this system is a little iffy now because this pivot screw could back itself out, and that's how we fit this one. Is we change the depth of our pivot screw and then lock it in with that little locking nut.
Cool.
I'm sorry, the locking screw.
That's right, and that's a 1/64 pitch.
Yes.
On the.
Look at this guy right here.
Hey. Ate my Wheaties this morning.
They did.
Let's see. Now we're going to be going to. Let me switch over.
We got a picture. There it is.
Hey,
so there's our King locking nut pivot screw.
Okay.
And there they are. Separately, you see we have what is considered a headless pivot screw. On the left, there is no head on it, and then on the right there is that brass locking nut.
Okay, so Ryan, how does that function?
That's a great question.
What
a solid, handsome question to ask. Thank you for your input. So what we have, here's our post on a King. Okay, it's a little different because it kind of has two flat sides on it, and then we have obviously this stuff right here. You'll notice the tip of that pivot screw is more of a straight taper.
Straight taper. Yep.
Straight taper. So what we'll have is a lot of times on the Mark 6s, the taper is kind of like that, except not as lumpy.
Right.
It's a little bit straighter. This has a little bit more of a straight taper on either side. So this is the one we're kind of dealing with.
Cool.
Right now. The end of the key is like the true taper system or the con, where it has a corresponding hole. And you can again see how it's a little bit more of a straight taper and not wonky conical like that one. Okay, so here are our threads that go into the post. They stick out a little bit. Here's our slot for our screwdriver. Obviously the main difference between this and the other ones is this has a nice little locking nut that goes right here. Okay, and that's actually how we set the depth. It's very similar to the Con style, which in order to do key fitting, if it's loose like this and I need to put this, stick this tip out a little bit more, I'll back this out, get it to where it's, you know, no lateral play, no oscillating play, and the key still freely rotates. And then once I get into position, I will tighten that locking nut down. Okay. The biggest thing about this that is a little bit better than that Con set, the screw style, is sometimes with the Con, it'll be loose. The pivot screw will actually be loose, and when you tighten up that set screw, it actually will angle your pivot screw. The nice thing about this is there's no side pressure on it. It's just pulling it straight back.
So Ryan, you'd say that would be the advantage.
Yeah.
The locking
The
nut
locking,
holds
yes.
it kind of more
Exactly.
securely.
Exactly. And it's a little bit easier to get a grasp of this versus that little tiny set screw that's, you know, into the post there.
Any disadvantage to this system?
The biggest thing is if you lose that nut. Okay, if you lose a nut, you're not going to have a good time, because then this is now just a headless pivot screw, which could work itself in, or worse, work itself back out, and then the key falls off, and then you lose gigs, and then, you know, your wife leaves you, and all things happen.
It all comes tumbling down.
It does, all because you lost your nut.
How do you so much nutting? How do you fit this system? I mean, is there any sort of extra key work they have to do?
Just like with the Con, you may have to do a little bit of reaming. Again, we set the depth by, you know, the locking nut. So if I have a little bit of looseness, I'm just going to loosen this nut, put it in a little bit further, and then it freely rotates. Sometimes you do have to do a little bit of reaming. Okay? You never ever countersink with this, but you do have to occasionally do some reaming.
What do you do? Where was I going to ask you? Oh, how do you tighten the nut?
I will use a pair of parallel pliers.
Okay.
Okay, like so. You don't want to use any scissor action. If you have a very tiny, and you can see there it is right there, very tiny. If you have a very tiny box end wrench, you can use that, and that's perfectly fine. But I just like to use my Knipex because I can get a nice grab of it, and then I'll use my screwdriver to tighten everything down.
Gotcha. Very good.
There you go.
And what do you do when that nut is stuck?
You probably use a little bit of penetrating oil on it, heat it up. The nice thing about the nut being brass is it's not like you have steel against steel and you'll have a lot of rust and corrosion and all that. It still can get stuck, but I think it's a little less than, you know, let's say the Con style where you get that little tiny pivot screw. But yeah, just some penetrating oil.
Okay.
Yep.
And for lubrication?
Lubrication, same thing. You would use a little bit of pivot roller lubricant right in the key end, and then obviously make sure that your whole pivot screw is properly oiled and greased.
Okay.
So preferably with the UltiMax system. Product placement. Like, share, and subscribe.
Like, share, and subscribe.
There it is. All hail the king.
Hail the king. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this installment. Make sure you tune in next week for part 5 of 5, where we go over Busher cylindrical pivot screws.
Whoa,
and
stuff.
we're going to be giving away another prize. So, Jody, make sure you get up with me. Send me an email to rich@MusicMedic.com. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe and all that good stuff so you can be entered in to the prizes when you put the hashtag in there as well. We'll see you next week for part 5 of 5. Happy repairing.